2020 vision now, and we've just gotten back one of the most comprehensive polls of the entire election cycle. The Pew Research Center spoke to more than 10,000 registered voters, and they confirm the ongoing trend towards Joe Biden. Pew has him up 10 nationally. The poll has Trump leading on just one issue. He's up 1 point on the economy, with Biden leading Trump on everything else. The poll also put a spotlight on how people plan to vote, and what they found suggests some real potential worries come election night. Biden has a lead of more than 40 points among those who plan to vote by mail, and he's up 15 among in-person early voters. But Trump leads by 32 points among those who will vote in person on Election Day. And keep in mind, most states will report their early and in-person results on election night, but only a handful of states will report their mail-in results on November 3rd, which means election night reporting will probably skew towards Trump, and maybe more than a little. Then there's something else for Democrats to consider. Even if Donald Trump is defeated on election night, Mitch McConnell is probably going to win re-election. He might be relegated to minority leader in the Senate, but he can still do real damage there. Plus, other Trump-enabling Republicans like Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Marco Rubio will still be in D.C., even if Trump is gone. Heck, Doug Collins, the Trump lapdog from Georgia, may well win a seat in the U.S. Senate. Plus, other Trump defenders and apologists like Jim Jordan, Devin Nunes, and Matt Gaetz aren't going anywhere either. So what kind of message do voters need to send to get these guys to act a lot less, shall we say, Trumpy? To discuss, we turn to Democratic strategist Jason Nichols. So, Jason, I'm worried about the methods people are going to use to vote, as well as their preferences, as spotlighted in the new Pew poll. Biden leads big among people who are going to vote by mail, but most of their ballots won't be reported on election night. He's got a smaller lead among in-person early voters whose votes will be reported election night. And Trump has his own big lead among in-person election day voting, which feels like it's going to set up this nightmare scenario where Trump appears to be ahead come 11 or 12 o'clock on election night, and it looks like Biden has to play catch-up, even though that won't really be the case. How worried are you? How worried should we be about that scenario? And is there any way to take the sting out of what we can sort of see coming down the tracks from Trump on election night?
Well, honestly, I'm worried about the whole situation. We know that mail-in balloting is something that is usually safe. It's something that 25% of people engaged in 2016. However, we see that some of these ballots are being rejected, and 20% in one county were rejected by and 20% of the ballots were rejected from African Americans that voted by mail over small discrepancies. So I'm worried about vote by mail. I'm honestly, Andrew, I am encouraging healthy young people under the age of 50 to put on a mask, socially distance, and vote in person either early or vote on election day. So that scenario that you laid out is also one that worries me, is that the president's bully pulpit on Twitter is something that riles up his base. I think you're going to see people who are going to be supposedly, vigilantes standing at polling places and intimidating voters who decide to vote in person. I think there's a real nightmare scenario for this election regardless. I think it's going to go to the courts. I think that's one of the unfortunate situations that we're in right now, is that the conservatives are going to have a supermajority. And I say conservatives only for the people on the SCOTUS, because the president isn't really a true conservative. He's a transactional person who doesn't govern based on conservative values. But the conservative court is, and I think that they will side with him.
I tend to think you're right. The more Trump or the more Biden supporters who actually can vote in person, the better off the results are going to be. I also want to ask you about what I'm calling de-Trumping the GOP if he loses. Because the McConnells are still going to be there. The Rubios and the Ted Cruzes are still going to be there. For the first time in my life, I'm going to vote a straight ticket this election. I'm not even considering any Republican candidates, not even the ones that I know personally on the local level or Republicans I might otherwise vote for, to try to send a message to the party about the way they coddled the president. Would that work? How intently do elected officials and their staffs check voting and election data? Would they notice?
Well, I think that, people pay attention to those kinds of things in exit polls. But I would tell people definitely for some of the bigger elections, absolutely vote, straight down the line. I think your strategy is a good one. I would say on the real super local level, still be careful about who you're voting to be your sheriff or your district attorney. Definitely look at their records. There have been a lot of cases where people have voted based on a party or what people believe to be a party affiliation, and they end up with someone who's not necessarily doing a good job. There may be an independent candidate on that same ballot who could possibly be a better sheriff or a better district attorney. So I would be careful on the super local level, but when we're talking senators and when we're talking congressmen and women, definitely, I think you're absolutely right. We need to send a message.
Well, and here's my worry, that even if Trump loses and Republicans lose the Senate and Democrats wind up in control of all three branches, you're still going to have the Jim Jordans and the Matt Gaetzes and the Rand Pauls and the Ted Cruzes acting Trumpish until they get the message that that doesn't work anymore. And I don't really think that just losing the Senate and losing the White House gets that message across. Do you?
There have always been, these people who are outliers, but we need to make sure that they are outliers. The Jim Jordans of the world, and of course they're emboldened by Trump. And I have a belief, that I'll say here only on RNN because we're all friends, and that is that I think Trump, if he loses, is going to go into media. I think he's going to start the Trump News Network. I think that that's coming. And I know for a fact that they already have the infrastructure for that. And so they're going to embolden those Trumpy kind of guys to continue the Trump legacy. We have to make it very uncomfortable for them. And the only way to do that is to take back the Senate and, of course, expand the lead in the House and certainly take the presidency. If we can make them outliers at that level, I think that we are in a really strong place as a nation to make conservatives conservative again, to make Republicans Republican again, make them the old school Romney, McCain, W. Bush, H.W. Bush Republicans. And those were people who at times would come to the table with Democrats, negotiate, and, have not necessarily governed by Twitter. And I think that that's really, really important.
Democratic strategist Jason Nichols. Jason, as always, thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.
And some breaking news. The Commission on Presidential Debates has just canceled the second debate between Trump and Biden that was scheduled for this coming Thursday. Up next here on RFL, some political ads that caught our eye, including a character from Seinfeld, hello Newman, railing against the president messing with the Postal Service just as millions of mail ballots are supposed to go out. And the Lincoln Project has a new spot about President Trump's case of COVID.